I'm hoping I can be heard now online as well as in the room. Do you know, there was a few folks that added in about the survey fatigue, and there was so much alignment around it in the chat. You had used that method where you were using the focus group approach. I mean, with that, do you feel that's a good way to go? Would you recommend that as an approach?
Yeah, I think it ended up with actually probably better quality results, because I managed to spend more time with the students, and I think they opened up about stuff that wouldn't necessarily have come up about in a survey, even with open questions. And I think the fact that they left with that sense of ownership of saying, well, these are our priorities for digital fieldwork, they felt included in the process, and it was much more a personable process. I think that worked quite well in the end.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. And there was another little query, and Betty had added in the chat about maybe sharing some of those story map resources and things that you'd link to. Are those things publicly available, or is that stuff?
Yeah, so they're going to be, there's two specific ones for two FSC locations that I've created, which are going to be shared to universities that are going to those locations, but there is also a generic version as well. So if people are interested, I'm very happy to share those.
Just get in touch with it.
Yeah.
Brilliant, Shireen. Thank you so much. Andy, I'm hoping you're still online as well. And if there's other questions as well in the room, sorry to shuffle all these microphones. Andy, if you are there, yeah, we're okay.
I am, yeah. I am, yeah.
Oh, again, the chat just took off, Andy. I don't know what you've been doing, but other universities are using this approach as well. It seemed like certainly a couple of other people had added in the chat there. And some of the suggestions had been around maybe partnering with local community groups as a way to kind of bridge that gap during the summer or things like that. Is that something that it sounded like you had some activity going on there? Is that something you've looked at or considered?
It's definitely something we've considered. It was something we were about to roll out literally just before the pandemic hit, and then everything's kind of got reset a couple of years. So it's something that's still on our radar. We're just building things back up to the level we want them to be, and getting the site in order with who's doing what from staff and students within the university community before we then think about approaching the right people beyond within the broader city community. But yeah, absolutely. And thinking about various charities within the area that deal with local food poverty as well, and thinking about donating surplus produce or just produce in general from the site to those people that are more in need of it than perhaps our university community are.
Brilliant. Wow. Okay, I'll check if there's any. How are we doing for time? Ready to go on the next one? Okay. Thanks everybody then for questions and chats and stuff. Katharine, over to you.
Thank you. It's Katharine Welsh here from the University of Chester. I hope everyone can hear me online, as we have just switched microphones. So if you could give me a little thumbs up to check that you can hear me, that'd be great. No, it's fine. Yeah. We've got people online. Yeah, we're good.
Do you want to see the chat or no?
No, it's fine. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I don't know what I've done here. Okay, so my talk is about virtual reality, and it's actually a demonstration. It's really difficult to demonstrate this to the online participants as there's no virtual headsets that we can send out to you in the post, and I'm really sorry for that. I can show you videos, which isn't just isn't the same experience, but unfortunately that's the best we can do in this hybrid situation. So virtual reality, so this is a little bit different to what we've been talking about today. Virtual reality has sort of been mooted as a possibility, or technology is mooted as a possibility for reducing carbon footprints by having different types of fieldwork, virtual field trips. And virtual reality has been evolving kind of over the last decade, and is probably at the point now where the technology is probably accessible for universities to purchase. The technology, the digital skills that people have are probably okay to be used. So it's taken a while to get here because virtual reality has been around for a long time. So this talk's really just about how we've developed a virtual reality experience for supporting student fieldwork in the context of virtual reality as a kind of potential different type of fieldwork for making it a bit more sustainable. So we're just talking you through the process of it, really, because you need technical skills for this, and there's often a cost implication. So we're just talking you through how we've done it. Virtual reality is an artificial or computer-generated simulation, and it's very immersive. It makes the person who's using the headset feel like they're there. It makes them feel like they can hear things, they can see things. I'm watching a National Geographic 360 video the other day. I turned around and a lion appeared, and I was very shocked. So it's very much an immersive experience, different to video, different to imagery. And virtual reality is typically achieved by wearing a headset, such as the one in the video, which we've got here with us. Sorry, the one on the screen. And there are alternatives. There are cheaper versions of doing this, but the best experience we have at the moment, I think, is typically in a headset such as this. Oops, skipped over too many. It's more immersive. It can make learning fun through gamification of learning. It's not just about seeing a video in 3D. There's interactive elements to it. You can get badges, you can get awards, you can get points for playing a part of the game, depending on the experience that you've developed. There's a novelty factor, so playing something only once or twice can really be quite engaging for students. It's increasingly becoming more affordable and more accessible, both from a cost perspective, but also from a nausea-inducing perspective. There is work ongoing to try to reduce the effects of motion sickness in people. And I'm one of those people that really suffers with that. So even setting up the headset was quite a struggle for me. So there is ongoing work in that. So there's still definitely disadvantages to using this approach, but lots of benefits as well. It can act as a spatial prompt. So before you go out into the field, you can have a look at the environment. You can start asking questions about the environment before you're actually there, because it's such an immersive experience. And the work of my colleague, Daniel Boss, who I should have mentioned at the start, has done a lot of this work. He's looked at how virtual reality can be used for field work. So Daniel demonstrated that there's a whole load of applications in fieldwork. It can enhance fieldwork observation before you go out into the field, can develop a student's critical analysis skills, and it can start to enhance student employability. Because what we're finding now in industry is a lot of the big companies, for example, here, AECOM have got virtual reality experience for flooding and to build resilience. They use that in communities, and it can be really powerful tools for preparing people. So without them having to experience it firsthand, they can experience it in virtual reality. So increasingly, big companies are using virtual reality, and so one of the findings of Daniel's study was that it can help to enhance student employability as well. So just a bit of background into this. Obviously, we've heard a lot about virtual tours and ThingLinks, one of which I set up for my fieldwork before the pandemic, and then enhanced it for the pandemic during that time. Virtual field tours can be really immersive. You can add lots of media, as we know. And then taking a step up from that is this kind of idea of virtual reality. And the University of Hull have done loads of brilliant work in this, and they use that for their flood outreach. So they've got things like Inundation Street, Help Callum, Help Sally, and that's very interactive and has been developed over the last few years. So do suggest you have a look at those examples as well. Just a bit of context really for our field trip. So we go out to Kinmel Bay, Rhyl and Tywyn on the North Wales coast. It's an area of quite socioeconomic deprivation, significant vulnerability. And what they have here, as the picture says, is just a few caravans. In the summer months, they have up to 50,000 extra people in this region. So they've got a huge transient population who don't particularly understand the risk they are from flooding. And so the students go out here, and what we realised is actually, I live near the coast, so I see this kind of environment quite often. Not everybody might have seen this before they go out into the field. So we decided we were going to develop a VR experience of a static caravan park, local, close by to a coastal flooding, so that we can use it both in the community, but also mainly so that we can use it for students before they go out in the field. So how did we do this? Well, we've got an experiential learning module at the university where students at the end of second year work for 5 weeks on a project. And so we contacted the games development team in their departments and said, have you got any students that'd be willing to work on a project with us? They came back and said yes. So we worked with students. We were their clients essentially for 5 weeks, and they had technical support from the games development kind of supervisory team. So we didn't have to get too involved in the technical side of it. We were very much advising on, yeah, I don't think we can include all these different types of flood, or no, that wouldn't be realistic. So we're very much the kind of the scientific advisors, I suppose, in that sense. And the students did a little bit of work on flooding, but were very much guided by us for the scientific elements. They presented us with a narrative for the game, and there's different elements to it, only some of which you can see on the video. And then the students went along, designed the game, designed the experience. So we've gone from kind of what we had originally in the thing link to these kind of virtual environments. I can hopefully, if this is embedded properly, can show you some of this. The sound quality is not brilliant, and I should have prefaced all of this by saying this is not perfect, this is not the finished product, but this is what we created after 5 weeks of working with students. So I don't think you'll be able to, I'm not sure you can hear the sound, which is fine. Oh, yes, you can. So I won't play all of it just because I'm aware of time. I think it's just muted the sound out because YouTube didn't like it because it was copyrighted. So this is kind of our virtual environment. So the students basically designed this environment. They designed this fictional caravan park, fictional participants to play in the game. And the idea is that you can actually pick up different parts. Can't mute that, sorry. Can I mute it? Yes. Yes, I can mute it. So you can pick up different parts they can pick up a piece of paper in the environment and look at how you can prepare better for flooding. I'm just going to try and move it on a little bit so you can actually see it flooding towards the end. So you can see that the water's starting to come in now. We've got a little car floating, sadly, in our caravan park. And then you can actually turn around in the virtual environment to see what's actually taking place in the static caravan as well. So this is just a view from whoever was using the headset at the time. They've just managed to record that. So I'll just leave it there at that point. Our reflections on this, we thought actually the process was quite quick, quite straightforward. It didn't require us to have the technical skills to be able to develop this, just an idea. And we had some students that were willing to work with us on this. It didn't require any funding, and it gave the students a new learning opportunity. So it might be, if there's something like this you'd like to develop, there might be opportunities within your own university to work with games development on projects like this. Some of the challenges of it, we were very uncertain about the abilities of the students. We had no idea who the students were, what their abilities were, because we don't have that experience of games development. We didn't know what was achievable, so we went in with fairly low expectations of, if we get an image of a caravan and it has some water in it, we'd be really happy. So for what they actually designed in 5 weeks, we were really quite impressed with what they'd managed to come up with. Some of the other challenges, it's not a finished product. The audio quality is not sufficient. As you could hear, you couldn't hear it properly. At the moment, we've got nowhere to obtain funding from, so we might employ the services of another group of students next year to work on this and to develop it further. If we wanted to improve this experience ourselves, we'd have to purchase, need to require funding to purchase these kind of assets from Unity, which is the software development. And we're very uncertain about our own knowledge. As I've just said, we didn't really know what to expect or how to go about this. And the next kind of issue is how to scale this up further, or how to make it a more interactive experience. So just what was needed? We needed software to design the VR experience, which the students had access to. Quite a powerful computer to be able to run the software. The VR headsets, one of which we've got with us. We've got the Oculus Quest with us. They're about between £300 and £400. We've got 4 in the department for students to use, but the cost of them are coming down, and the quality of the actual headsets is increasing all the time. And just some suitable teaching spaces to make sure there's space that people can actually sit down and have a bit of space really to use them. The challenges, as we've talked about, it's the time. If you wanted to employ this for yourself, it's the time, cost, training, expertise. But there might be options, as I said, through your own universities to employ students, to give them some opportunities to work in partnership with students in that way. I think they got a lot out of it. One of the other challenges we had was we did ask students for reflections on this, but it turns out students don't look at their emails over the summer, so they didn't get back to us. And that is one of the challenges that we've got with it. Health and safety is obviously an issue. Not everyone can use it, and we've really got to think about how accessible it is for people. And cyber security as well. This idea of sort of, what data is being stored on a cloud, is that eye tracking motion and things like that being stored on a cloud. So that needs some thought. So what we want to do from this is explore the extent to which students think this VR experience enhances their fieldwork before they go out into the field, but also investigate the optimum level of immersion preferred by the students to enhance their fieldwork learning. So for example, is a picture sufficient? Can we substitute it with a digital image? Or can we augment it by developing a ThingLink tour? Is that enough? Can we modify their experience by using virtual reality, or can we redefine it by using even more sort of tech in terms of substitutional reality, where you can look through a headset but also be interacting with physical things in a room? So that's kind of the next. We're going to explore it through the SAMR model of enhancing technology to see whether students say, actually, the level of immersion that we require for pre-field work is a ThingLink's perfect. It's cost effective. It doesn't require too much tech. So that's kind of our next experience. Or do they prefer the virtual reality experience? And if so, how can we help staff to develop them? And also, how can we make sure they're accessible for everybody? I'm going to stop there. I don't know if I'm in time or not. Yeah, no, that's fine. I can stop there and then catch up.
Thank you very much, Katharine. There's a question that's come through the chat from Leslie, who's in the room. One of the issues with previous VR development has been the sustainability of the software and who's responsible for it. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that's true of any technology, no matter if it's virtual reality or anything like that, iPads, everything. We've had this issue about sustainability and how to ensure that the tech sort of stays up to date, really. And of course, that comes with funding challenges all the time. So I think the way in which we've done it through students, through games development, is that the games development department have got subscriptions to the software that's required, and they need that for their program. So if that moves on to something else, they technically should be updating the software for those programs, and hopefully it keeps it sustainable in that way. But it's a challenge with all technology, I think. So it's a really good question there. Thanks, Leslie.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
I know I can demo to anybody in the room who wants to have a look at a flood experience in VR, and we've sort of switched the program around so we can do that over lunch or any of the breaks if you'd like a try of the headset. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. We're going to swap over speakers now. So we have Brian Molly's going to speak. He's just getting his, well, Katharine's our slide master. So Katharine is going to put her slides, Brian's slides up, and then Brian will have 10 minutes. He's going to talk about image metadata and its importance in data interpretation, preservation, curation, and use. So I'll hand over to you,
Thank
Brian.
you very much. This may look a slightly grandiose title and perhaps not very techy compared with some of the things that we've been hearing about this morning. On the other hand, visual images in all sorts of ways are very much a part of what we do, how we report things, how we do things almost in everyday life. And I really just want to highlight, I can get the, it's not. Oh, take control. I'm sorry, I forgot to do that. Right. Okay.
If you don't mind me taking
Yep.
the presenter view there a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
okay. It goes into the presenter view automatically. I can't do it.
You know, I'm right.
And then it's just
Yeah.
pop-
Okay. You'd think I got these things sorted out by now. Anyway, this was a an image in the Observer actually talking about student accommodation. And reading the text, it came to this, and it was talking about students in Glasgow. And I looked at that, that's not Glasgow. And then I looked carefully, and I'll read it out because you might not be able to see it. It says a relative's floor in Edinburgh is home for some Glasgow University students. Well, okay, that's not a relative's floor, and it's not Glasgow students, it's Edinburgh. So the metadata that you see as a caption in this image isn't really right. So let's neglect that. But what does it actually show? And we're going to do a very simple field trip. You may recognise the building on the left, which has come into the news fairly recently. And that's St Giles Cathedral. But yes, OK, how do you find out more about St Giles Cathedral? Well, one way is to use Wikipedia. And what that will give you is a latitude and longitude in traditional degrees, minutes, seconds form on the left-hand side. I've been working about using decimal latitude and longitude, which is far more useful. In other words, you just put the degrees, minutes and seconds as an appropriate number of decimal points within those square brackets as a tuple in order. So that's latitude and longitude, and if it's wetter than Meridian, you've got minus. If it's southern hemisphere, you've got minus. So that's just a conventional you work with. And you can paste that directly into Google Earth or OpenStreetMap, and it will take you there. So that putting in that decimal latitude and longitude, which would also go into a GPS quite easily. So we can forget what 3 words, we can forget national grid. Those are, for the most part, irrelevant nowadays. But we can do other things about it. OK, so, oops, there we go. We can have a look at the Google Earth information about all of that. So that gives us information about St Giles's Cathedral, and we could look at all sorts of other places on there. The camera obscuring, you'll see an image from that in a minute. You might have heard of Bellingcat. This uses, it's basically fact checking, and it's been used in a forensic way. And there's a link there. That's I think that just comes down from Wikipedia. So it uses images to reconstruct, if you like, scenes of crimes, wherever that happens to be, and who actually happens to be perpetrating. So that's associated with what does the image tell you, which isn't immediately obvious, that comes up, for instance, in news items. Metadata is data about data. Well, yeah, fine, okay. But we're using images to support all sorts of things supported by text. We're using images ubiquitously and for all sorts of things, everyday use of smartphones, and in particular in scientific papers, reports, books, and students' reports and books. So this is something that they should be getting into in a whole variety of different ways where we can start to share data. I'm coming onto that later on. Selfies and photographic groups, and this brings in safety, ethics, as well as digital skills. And I think Ad is going to say something more about that subsequently. I was reading a book about doing some work on landscapes at the moment, and it starts off, our starting point is Lindisfarne or Whalley Island. OK, so there is Lindisfarne, and we can specify where it is by decimal latitude and longitude, and we can even specify where that image was taken from. The book you see on the right-hand side, Landscapes, Natural Beauty and the Arts, you would think relates to my subject, geomorphology. There is not one image in the whole of that book other than, OK. That amazes me, but anyway, we won't go any further down that. But if we do start to think about the images we use and the data, and again, something I'm working on at the moment is critical zone science, which relates, and this diagram on the right-hand side, relates aspects of soil science, weathering, geology, geomorphology, ecology, and brings those things into a general framework. And I think that goes back to something that Leslie was talking about earlier on. So here are some students at a field trip taking a soil sample, and maybe they record that as Weatherslack would. Now you can go in directly using phone, eTrex, whatever it happens to be, or indeed go back on Google Earth and determine where that position was. And you use that position, decimal latitude and longitude, within that report, whether it happens to be. And that means it's then shareable so that other students, subsequent years, subsequent field trips, other institutions can come back and then amass information about what students did at one field site, quite literally put down to the nearest meter, compared with other locations within that wood or within the general area. So this is something that actually is a useful skill to be able to have. In other words, the data just isn't about the caption. It's about the data that might be captured in that particular image, and using decimal latitude and longitude, so I keep pressing that, is one way of bringing that together. And the other thing I'm looking at in terms of looking at viewpoints, if you like, this is image enhancement, but actually being aware of what we interpret, in this particular case, a geomorphological scene. So the bit on the left-hand side is essentially the metadata, but it's embroiling all sorts of things in there which are not immediately obvious. Just say, oh, it's a glacial landscape. Well, yes, that, but up to a point. I'm not going any further down there, but it does show the importance of sharing that information, because, for instance, soil scientists might be interested in how that develops over time, climatologists and so on. So this is a lead into the FAIR principles of data referencing: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Again, that comes in not just to the image, which is reusable in all of these ways, it's accessible up to a point. How do we use the data? And that data could well be at a particular site here, recording that data. And when you publish it, you put in the decimal latitude and longitude of that soil sample site, or where you sample the water, or where you did something else, or even taken a photograph. So they all come back to relatable to the decimal latitude and longitude. And I think that's important, not only for our own research, but to get it into the minds of students, what they do. And this comes back into something, again, that Helen mentioned earlier on about sharing data and so on. And this is something I've been doing with respect to, it's not a virtual field trip, it's, if you like, a pop-up geoheritage site in Weston-super-Mare. Again, those points relatable to decimal latitude and longitude, and each of the images has metadata associated with it, applicable in this case to the geology and the geomorphology of the area. So again, this comes back into reporting things and things that the general public, we're into saying how we do our research, how students do their research, and communicating that more widely. Just returning back to Edinburgh. So this is the alt text, which we said, yeah, we should be putting that alt text. That's generated by the image itself. It looked at that, that's a cityscape. It doesn't interpret where that is. You have to put that in. So in the center information, that was a download from a DSLR, but you can actually put that information, the metadata, in to the title, what camera you took it from, which is part of the EXIF data, but also the location that you actually took it from and the direction of that. So this starts to build back into how we take and publish our images and how it can be, for instance, reusable, interoperable, and those FAIR principles. These are some of the things where we can actually store data. There are different protocols for this. So the most popular one for librarians is Dublin Core, but I'm not going to go any further down that. That goes into the sort of information technology side. But it does raise issues of where you have a photograph and you may want to be tracked. You may be tracked if you're perpetrating some heinous crime by Bellingcat. So that's a sort of nefarious way in which you've got to be careful about how you use the data, and in particular the metadata. So that's all I want to say at the moment. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brian. Right, so we are more or less on track time-wise. There's been lots of conversation in the chat. I think I'm just going to let it keep going with the chat unless anyone has particular conversations that they want to have right now. So now it's time for some interactive demonstrations. Do I hand over? So I've got Katharine, David and Addie. Do you want me to hand the microphone over to either of you, or
I'm just happy for anyone who wants to have a go to come up with
Addie and David? Yeah.
Instructions makes it sound kind of serious, like you've got to do something, which I'm not. Nothing will be enforced. So I've just popped in the chat for people who can get to it a link to your little lunchtime activity. I'm also going to open that link up. What am I? Yeah, I'll open that up here so we can kind of see where that's going to take us. And this probably isn't going to show on the screen for people who are virtually, but hopefully the people who are virtual have got the link so you can get to where we're about to be anyway. So what you're going to see when you get to there is a bit of a choice. You can either open it in your browser or open it in the Survey 123 app. If you don't know what that's talking about, choose the left one. So unless you know that you want to do the right hand option, choose the left hand option. And over lunchtime, because we are all fieldwork people and we spent the whole morning inside, it would be lovely to go into the sunshine and the blue sky around Milton Keynes or wherever you are, and start to think about perhaps mapping some of these sustainable development goals that we're kind of considering today. And think, okay, well, how does the campus of the OU or wherever I happen to be, how's it helping achieve some of those goals that Andy introduced us to earlier? So there's a little form. You can wander around. You can find some features that you think are evidence of the OU either doing something good or maybe having room for improvement in terms of a few of those sustainable development goals. Take a photo, have a little think about whether is this a positive or negative impact on those goals. How great is it? So there's a little score from 1 to 5, and then a little space for some notes. And we'll come back and we'll revisit these points that you're going to add to our map through the course of this lunchtime later on this afternoon. So we'll revisit all of these this afternoon, but it's a good excuse to go outside and to wander around and get a bit of fresh air over lunch, basically.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave. All right, we're going to start and break for lunch now. So here on campus, we've got lunch provided, and thanks very much to the school that I'm from, the School of Earth, Environment and Ecosystem Science.